Hey, everybody, welcome to the Daniel Davis Deep Dive, back on the Roadshow edition today. You can see I'm not in my normal lair in the Washington, D.C. area. Right now, I'm coming to you from Houston, Texas, where I'll be on travel for a few days. But a lot of things keep happening, and I don't want to just leave you kind of hanging in the lurch without bringing you up to date on what's going on. So here we are. So Trump just spent 2 or 3 days in the UK on a state visit and talked to King Charles and had all the pomp and circumstance and all this. And so you might think that the headlines were going to primarily be about maybe U.S.-UK relations, the special relationship, or maybe about the Russia-Ukraine war. And a lot of those things were discussed. But one of the bigger headlines to come out of this was, oddly enough, Afghanistan. I mean, Trump actually talked to, and apparently he's been saying this before. I actually had an engagement with somebody who was in the Trump administration. I actually know somebody who is still in the Trump administration. Recently, at a relatively high level, said, "Oh, he says this stuff all the time. He doesn't mean it." But when you hear the statements he made, you got to go, "Really?"
We're going to leave Afghanistan, but we're going to leave it with strength and dignity. And we're going to keep Bagram, the big air base, that one of the biggest air bases in the world. We gave it to them for nothing. We're trying to get it back, by the way. Okay, that could be a little breaking news. We're trying to get it back because they need things from us. We want that base back. But one of the reasons we want the base is, as you know, it's an hour away from where China makes its nuclear weapons.
Might be a little breaking news that we want to take back Bagram Air Base. Now, for those who may not know, Bagram Air Base was the main logistics hub for our entire 20-year disaster of an Afghanistan war. And actually, on my last combat deployment there in 2010, 2011, that's where my headquarters was. So I'm very, very familiar with Bagram. And for those who may not be, let me just show you a map here. So this is, let me screen back a little so you can kind of see. This is the outline. This is Afghanistan here. Here's Kabul, the capital city. And then just a little bit north of there is the Bagram Air Base, very strategically located. You also see this is where the closest point to where China actually intersects, this small little sliver of land here. It's actually a border into Afghanistan. And then China goes on from there and all this area back here. Now, when he says, they're 100 miles from where China makes nuclear weapons, maybe he's talking about some classified information because I don't know where they make their nuclear weapons, but I guess you could draw a line 100 miles from there and just kind of say, well, it's in an arc, something like this. But listen, I mean, you got to say, wait, what are you talking about? That's where we want to go back there because that's where China, I mean, think about what you're actually communicating to the Chinese. You're telling them, hey, we want to bring a military base back. We don't want the whole country of Afghanistan. We just want this place right here in case I want to go after your nuclear weapons. I mean, surely even Trump that's not lost on him, what kind of an impact that's going to have. Now, first things first, wanting it and getting it are two very, very different things. In fact, the Taliban has, oddly enough, didn't just categorically reject it or any engagement with the United States. They did reject the idea that we would go back to Bagram Air Base, but they still said, hey, they reiterated their call to reclaim huge amounts of air base, but Taliban says U.S. must engage without seeking military presence. So Trump continued to say that in other comments that Taliban needs the United States and they have some things that only we can give them. And I'm sure that's right because there's a lot of needs in Afghanistan. I still have a friend that I knew during my time there who's lived there, and he confirms to me periodically that the living conditions are indeed terrible. Still lots of sanctions on the Taliban, and their economic situation is just deplorable. So it's very, very difficult for really across the entire country and society. So I'm sure that the Taliban would like to get out of its isolation and be able to do more trade, et cetera. But the cost is not going to be giving us Bagram Air Base. And what would we even do there? I mean, just think about that. You want to reestablish our military presence at Bagram Air Base by your own voice because it's close to China, and not just close to China, but close to where they make nuclear weapons. I mean, that can't have any kind of positive impact. And then because there's no other mission up there, what is the military going to do? What is the Air Force going to do? Whether it's special forces or Army or any other people that would be there for sustainment, what would be their mission if we don't go after China? They would just be existing. I mean, just think about this, folks. I mean, this is, I'm sorry, for those who may be big fans of President Trump, this is just weird. I mean, there's no kinder way to put it. to even think about going back into Bagram, much less to make a big deal of it and to say outward that maybe a little bit of breaking news, we're trying to get Bagram back. If the Taliban says no, then either you look completely powerless because they're not going to let you come. And then what are you going to do? You're going to take it by force? Certainly not, because now then you set up a hostile situation where they have to defend themselves with no mission. But that's kind of where we are on this right now. And then let's take a look at the expected response from the Chinese side. As usual, they're not hyperbolic, they're not over the top, but they say this creating confrontation runs counter to people's aspirations. China says Trump's planning to retake Afghanistan Air Base. That's just not going to work. But I bet behind the scenes that they have far more concerns about it than that. Now, it's probable that China says, okay, this probably is Trump, just being Trump and just making these wild claims that are totally divorced from reality. I don't think they would actually worry about it unless we somehow actually got the base and started moving forces in there and, bombers, refuelers, possibly missiles, et cetera. Then I think you're going to have a lot more reaction from China. But probably up to this point, they're just going to say, okay, it's not helpful, but it's not going to happen anyway. And that's probably the case. That's probably how it's going to work out, that there's not going to be any going back to Bagram. But I'm telling you, you just got to ask the bigger question. Why is this on Trump's mind? Why is he talking about this? I mean, this kind of harkens back to earlier in his administration that I'm going to take Panama Canal back, or we want to take Greenland, possibly by force. We might want to have Canada as our 51st state and would not overtly rule out the use of military force. Just said, no, all options are on the table. And then here we got stuff going on in Venezuela, down in the Caribbean Sea. This is not good for America. It literally just diverts our strength all over the globe. It's not helpful. It's not in our American interest. It's things we don't need to do. Now, if you want to do something to try and interdict drugs and stuff coming in from Venezuela or Colombia, which is where far more of it comes in through, for Venezuela, it's more of a transit area, both in sea, water, and air. That there's ways to do that. You can interdict it at the border, et cetera, instead of talking about maybe invading and using military force on Venezuela. That's what he's talking about here in recent days and weeks, that we might use military force. And there's no plan. There's no attainable military objective to that. All you can do is get yourself sucked in to another unwinnable situation in our own hemisphere. Won't help the situation in terms of the drugs, because the drugs are going to come in as long as there's demand. No matter what, the drugs will come through. If you stop it up in one place, they'll simply move around it and they'll go someplace different. If you set up roadblocks here, I mean, it's the hemisphere. It's not like a choke point that you can cut off a choke point. The stuff is just, it'll go anywhere, in the air, on the sea, through land routes, et cetera. So that's not going to stop anything, but it could get you in a really big, dead end, sucking situation where it just sucks in all your resources and everything else and gets into a lethal situation. I mean, just if you don't want to go much further, just look at the Houthis. We said we're going to stop the Houthis with relentless pressure and power and all this, and we're going to prevent them from interdicting in the Red Sea. And that was a fairly constrained small area, and we couldn't do it. We were spending $1 billion a month just throwing missile after missile and interceptor after interceptor. Didn't end the situation. It didn't stop the problem. And that was entirely predictable, but we still tried. And then we just stopped, which was the right thing to do. But the better thing to do was not to have started it. But you see, that's the problem with the administration, especially the president, is he doesn't think things through. He doesn't say, okay, what are the ramifications of doing this? This should be in a thought process before anything is even talked about. The first thing he should do is, it would be cool. Let's just say, for example, it would be cool if we can get the Bagram Air Base back. That might give us some strategic flexibility in the event China gets crazy on something. And then you start saying, first of all, just to yourself, what would be the reaction? What would be the chances the Taliban would agree to this? What would be the reactions from the Chinese side if we actually make good on it? And then you get your experts together, the people who've literally committed their whole lives to these different areas, and you get diversity of opinions, et cetera. And then you say, okay, based on all the things you guys have told me, either the cost is too high, the chance of success too low, or who knows, in a different case, maybe it's like, well, there's a risk, but there's also a potential reward. So maybe I'll go down that pace. That's how it's supposed to work, period, across the board. Anything that you're going to talk about doing as the president of the United States, it doesn't look like that is ever taking place. It doesn't look like he ever even asked the questions. Just these aspirations come out of his mouth, and then to hang with whatever happens and what the consequences are. And then some places like this Houthis thing, he throws it into action, which cost us $1 billion and embarrassment because everybody in the world, despite what spin he put on it, and this Secretary of War Hegseth put on it, everybody else can see it was a complete and abysmal failure. That's what happened right there. And this would be, doing the Venezuela issue would be just as bad as that. There's just as much opportunity for failure, very little chance for any kind of positive thing. And then now this issue with the Bagram Air Base is even more crazy. There's just no path to doing anything of value or benefit to the United States that the cost wouldn't be out the top. And there's no way the Taliban is going to allow us. Why would they do that? Don't you remember what happened during, first of all, during, I think it was the 1832 British, when they tried to conquer the Taliban, even though they were technologically vastly superior, it was disaster. They ended up leaving in great bloodshed and humiliation. Then the Soviets tried it in the 80s, 10 years of disaster. And then we were the latest power to show that you're not going to quell them, even though they're backwards and all this kind of stuff technologically. They're also long suffering, and they hate invaders. They hate foreigners. Now, why do you think all of that history would suddenly be different for the Bagram Air Base? And as though the Afghanistan, bordering state with China, is going to risk the ire of China. China can help them, but they can also hurt them. So China would definitely not be passive if this started going down and getting any traction, and they would certainly take action against the Taliban. And I don't know. I haven't paid attention here lately. I don't know if they're doing anything positive or not. If they have trade, I'm not sure what the current state of affairs is, but I can assure you, whatever it is, it could turn very much dark and worse if Taliban should do that. But they're aware of that, and they're not going to have a problem with their neighbor just to please somebody from 10,000 miles away on the other side of the earth that they gain hardly anything from. That's where we started. So that was the big headline coming out of Trump's European trip to UK. But there were others. And let's take a look at what that was, because turns out, probably using this same, I was going to say mentality, but absence of mentality, absence of thought process of think things through, Trump says that basically Putin is going to be forced, and he have no choice but to give in to what Trump wants.
Very simply, if the price of oil comes down, Putin's going to drop out. He's going to have no choice. He's going to drop out of that war. And when I found out that the European nations were buying oil from Russia, and as you know, I'm very close to India. I'm very close to the Prime Minister of India. I spoke to him the other day, wished him a happy birthday. We have a very good relationship. He put out a beautiful statement, too. But I said, I sanctioned them. China is paying a very large tariff right now to the United States, but I'm willing to do other things, but not when the people that I'm fighting for are buying oil from Russia. If the oil price comes down, very simply, Russia will settle. And the oil price is way down. We got it way down. We're drilling, and we produce more oil than anybody else in the world. We're doing a lot. But I was disappointed to see that, and the Prime Minister was disappointed to see that. And it wasn't him, it was other countries. And you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't. That's not playing fair with the United States, and we can't have that.
So it would be no choice. No choice. Putin would have to just give up the war. I mean, that is, there's so much troubling on many levels. There's about three things I want to point out from that soundbite right there. Some of the things that he said. We'll start with that one. That Putin will have no choice. I worry that he may believe that he may actually think Putin will have no choice. That kind of simplistic thought that all I have to do is bring either the price of oil down or limit how much money he can make, and then that pressure point will cause him to give in to do whatever it is that Trump wants. And I'm just like, do you not know anything about Russian history? Have you never seen what the Russians did against Napoleon? Although sometimes you claim that, and actually you state that. You say that Russia has a history of these kind of things, so you do apparently know. Or you see what kind of extraordinary suffering they were willing to do in World War I before the Russian Revolution started. 5 million dead before that. It took that kind of casualties from mismanagement from the Tsar and their military leaders, et cetera, on top of an economic collapse. etc., and a bunch of other stuff. It certainly wasn't that simple. But the point being that it took 5 million Russians dead to finally push them over the edge to where they rose up. And then, of course, during World War II, it was more like 20, depending on who you want to talk to, 25, 30 million on top of that. So, and they not only didn't revolt, that they just knuckled down and went in harder. This is an existential threat for Russia. And there is no financial pressure point on Russia that's going to cause them to just give away, because that's why Russia keeps saying over and over, it's the core causes. It's the root causes of all this, which led to the war in the first place, that must be acknowledged. It's not just territory. It's not just where the line of contact is and where the lines are going to be on the map afterwards. Those are secondary things. The primary thing is that there's not going to be a hostile force on their border that's friendly to NATO, that is hostile categorically to Russia, i.e., the Zelensky regime and a lot of what the Russians consider neo-fascists, etc. Ukraine has a different word. Doesn't matter. The Russians consider that hostile, and they will not stop and have a negotiated settlement on terms that no matter what the price of oil will be, they will suffer a lot. You can't even calculate how much it would be before they're going to just give up on that. There's no rational path. The only way that Russia could be forced into a settlement against its wishes is if they didn't have the physical capacity to continue the war. That's the only way. And you see, if you're confused still on that, and you think, well, then let's put more pressure on them. Let's just keep going a little bit further until finally we find that pressure point. Look at Zelensky. Zelensky has all the powers against him. He has all the fundamentals against him, just irrevocably. And yet, has he given up? His country is just bombarded from one border to the next, all north to south, east to west, all the way up to the European borders. And they just keep getting pummeled night after night with these long-range forces. They lose thousands of troops every month. They continue to methodically be whittled down. They have not had any kind of an offensive success since the very short-term Kursk offensive, which was almost suicidal and was for about 70,000 of their troops, gained nothing in the end. And they, in fact, lost more of another territory in Sumy, which Russia still has a toehold in to this day. So that's everything has been going against Ukraine all the way since about November 2022, or November 2023, we'll say. And so yet their economy is fine. I think I showed you yesterday that Zelensky has said, look, I need 120 billion to keep the war going next year. And that's just to keep the state alive. He said, we can probably muster about 60 of that on our own. So I need another 60 billion. So far, the most anybody's talking about is 2.3 billion that they'll give him. So he's saying, I don't even know how we're going to exist. And yet, he still hasn't given up. He still is not willing to negotiate. Now, what possible ration could anybody point to that Russia, with Putin, who's been in power for 20 years, with all of the history Russia has, with all of their natural resources, with the vast country that they have, that Russia could come up with a pain point that would cause them to surrender when the Ukraine side won't, when they have all these pressures? You see what I'm saying? If you know anything about Russia, you know there's not going to be a pain point. You can wish there was, you can hope there is, but there's not, and there's no rational reason to think there is. And so to place policy and to place your future success on the hope that something irrational happens, you're setting yourself up for domestic disaster. Our side is not going to come out looking good on this. You've seen John Mearsheimer on our show more than once say it's going to be decided on the battlefield, because we abjectly refuse to have it settled on the negotiating table where we could at least come out with something beneficial and positive for our side. We reject all that. So the only thing left to Russia is an eventual military success. I mean, that's just what we're setting ourselves up for. And then we'll have to deal with the fallout of that, of everybody in the world knowing that we, this most powerful military alliance in the history of mankind, couldn't even keep little Ukraine from falling to Russia. That's just where we're going here, folks. The other thing here said, I thought that was interesting. He said, Trump said, I just found out that Russia is selling oil to some European countries. I just found that out. And I was going, wait, I mean, does he think that nobody knows what's going on and that he can say that and nobody's going to do what we just did and said, what do you talk about? Everybody knows it. It's all on the topic of conversation all the time. It's in all the headlines. People discuss it. Does he really not know? I don't know, but that's troublesome that he says, I just found out. And then Starmer actually, because he's standing right next to him when he's talking about that, they look over at Starmer and catch out this pretty tough question from his own media.
Prime Minister, President Trump has said he's ready to impose major sanctions on Russia if NATO countries stop purchasing Russian oil. He's got a point, hasn't he?
I think it is a challenge to Europe. There are a number of European countries which are too reliant on energy from Russia. The UK actually obviously has almost got nothing at all, but we do need to bear down and work with our European counterparts here. There are one or two countries, I think, that do need to look again at the question of energy. There's no one silver bullet here. We do have to have a wider suite of sanctions, which we've put in place. We've said we stand with Ukraine from the start to the finish, and that means we must continue.
Yeah, that's not a good answer. I mean, you can see him kind of like going, well, I mean, I guess that we're not buying that much oil from Russia. We've got it zero, and I guess there's some. You see, I mean, you're called out there on the carpet, and everybody in Trump's just kind of looking at him, going, "What you going to say?" So it wasn't a good look for Starmer, but it was pretty embarrassing for him. And as a matter of fact, on Air Force One on the way back, Trump was asked about how embarrassed Starmer was.
Did the Prime Minister talk to you about Ukraine? He indicated he did. What were his arguments for what you should do?
He was really a little bit embarrassed, and he's rightfully, that I called Europe, NATO countries, EU countries, you can call it either way because they're very similar, but that I caught them buying oil from Russia. And he said, that's not good. I mean, I appreciated that he said that. He said, that's not good. Now, how about that? We're supposed to do all this stuff, and they're buying oil from Russia.
So we're 3.5 years into this war. Now, 8 months into the Trump administration, and you caught Europe buying oil from Russia? I mean, that makes it sound like he didn't know. I mean, does he not know how embarrassing that is? Forget about Starmer being embarrassed. He was. But Trump is not embarrassed. At least Starmer recognized the duplicity with what he's talking about, that we're putting sanctions on Russia. And he really quickly pivoted over to that. Well, we're going to put sanctions on Russia, and we're looking at a multitude of things that we need to get done, et cetera. But we told Ukraine we'll be with them from the start to the finish. And so, yeah, the ugly finish, and meaning that, like, as they go down the drain, you're hooking your country and your reputation to it, and foolishly going down with the ship. Why would you do that? Number one. But I guess they just have this delusion that some magic thing will happen, and it won't end up that way, because, well, it never has. Since World War II, we've always figured something out. We've always, talked our way out of stuff, and there was never actually a cost anything. There was some embarrassment here and there and some lack of success on what we wanted. But I mean, hey, we're the West, and we kind of stuck together, and there was no actual cost. But now I think that we are in a situation where, with President Trump talking about things that have no chance of success, that he's going to get the Taliban to give us an air base, that China's going to sit passively by if we come with the avowed statement that it's close to their nuclear weapons production facilities, that we're going to put maybe sanctions on Russia that are harsh, and that he'll have no choice but to. I mean, when our adversaries see this, when other countries around the world see this, they think, what is wrong with you people, man? I mean, you talk about things that push people back in the direction of the East, and that this growing conglomeration of BRICS and the SCO and all kinds of things, where they're coming up with new economic forums, the Chinese Belt and Road, that all kinds of bilateral, multilateral events, et cetera. And they see that no one on the other side is putting pressure on anybody to do anything, but they are going, have you seen that? And they have seen that, and they continue to see that. And when it comes to what is going to be good for our country, folks, I'm just telling you, the days of running roughshod like we're the Wild West cowboy, and that we can do whatever we want and nobody else has the power to do anything, those days are over. They're past tense. probably never to be seen again, certainly not in our lifetimes. If anything, the power dynamic is continuing to shift to the east, and now it's doing so faster because of our own actions. So we are facilitating and accelerating our own cost and our own demise if it goes that far. Because Russia is not going to be forced into anything. Bagram is not coming back to us, and China will not stand by passively when we try to do that. And then this whole thing about putting more sanctions on Russia, come on. We've tried this for 3.5 years, more than 3.5 years now. And it always failed. And because of the construction that Russia retooled its economy to prevent the pressure it has from the West to do sanctions stuff, they've made themselves, if not sanctions proof, greatly sanctions resistant. So you don't even have the levers to play anymore, because the things you would do, now Russia has other outlets with other partners in the rest of the world. And they continue to, if you wanted to isolate Russia, that's obviously a thing of the past as well. That's not even, I'm talking even recently, because Putin was isolated earlier in this war to a certain degree. But now that's moved in the opposite direction. Now then you see him being feted in places all the time. He's had international visits. He's going to places. Other countries are coming to them. They're expanding just, culturally. They're expanding economically, et cetera. And Russia is playing the long game. Russia is playing the long game militarily and economically. And they see that we have the cards, and there's no reason to take a lot of risk. I suspect that if things started getting tight, that they would be willing to take risks, because they certainly have levers to do that. But so far, they and the Chinese, of course, are famous for their long suffering and their long view. They always look to the long term, not to the short term, or not even to the midterm. But they always have a long-term vision in mind, and they're playing it out like that right now. And I saw an article, I guess it was yesterday when I was on the plane on the way to Houston, that China is basically saying, hey, we're just going to sit back and watch the U.S. just destroy itself. We're not going to get involved. We don't have to take any action. We don't need to do anything to accelerate this. You guys are going to do it on your own. And I think that there's some plausibility to that. I think they may end up doing that, because they see what is the classic thing they say? If you see your enemy struggling, don't help him out. Just let him continue to founder. Don't do something dumb that's going to get him out of the trouble. And I think that's what China's play is right now. And it's not going to be good for us. And kind of toward that end, and again, kind of put a bow on this. One last question that Trump was asked aboard Air Force One after the meeting. He was asked about, how much longer are you going to give President Putin before this ceasefire? Which it's an odd question, because that's been taken off the table a long time ago. Russia's not going to do a ceasefire. I've been telling you that from the first time it came up, really in December, when that idea came up. There's no way they were going to do that, and certainly they haven't. But now then, Trump was asked that question, and I think he infers something in his answer. See if you can catch it.
It's been a month since your meeting with President Putin. Is it time for a ceasefire to come?
It doesn't feel like it. But at the right time, if I have to do it, it'll be harsh.
When he says I'll do it, I think that he means that if there's no ceasefire at the right time, then I'll have all of these huge sanctions and secondary tariffs on all these different countries, and it'll be harsh or whatever. He still has this. I suspect it's not a fantasy that he thinks it'll work. If he had that fantasy, I think he would have already done it. If he thought that putting in those sanctions on Russia and secondary tariffs on people who buy their oil, if he thought that would work, I think he would have already done it, other than India. And I think that there's multiple things going on with that one country as well. But if he thought a broader application would work, I think he would have already done it. I think, though, what he means when he says this is that I'm just going to say this stuff, and so people will think I'm going to do something later, and then that threat that maybe I'll act will cause them to actually do what I want them to do. And I'm just telling you, there's zero chance of that. Not unlikely, not improbable, but zero. They're not going to do it, because they know that we don't have the stick. They know that we don't have the resources to compel compliance on anything, and that if we did those things, it would be painful to them, especially where you're talking about China, India, and Brazil. It would cause them some pain, which they wouldn't like, and they don't want to go down that path. But they are also playing for the medium and long term, all those countries, and they know that we can't sustain it. That's why when Trump had this 145% tariff on China earlier on, he just said, they just said, you can't sustain that. And he was right. And Trump went off of it shortly, not long after it went in. It went down to 30%. I think they're still trying to negotiate some things even as we speak here. But I think they know that if there's a pressure point to have somewhere, it's our pressure point. It's that if we take this action, it will be us who is hurt in the medium and long term and not them. And I think that they're willing to play this out. All this stuff is not good for the United States, and it's something we need to change. But all I can do is tell you what he's saying and what the realities are here. Obviously, we have no influence over anything in the Trump administration. I don't know that anybody does. I don't know that cabinet secretaries do, frankly. But that's where we are today, folks. That's all we got for you today on this special edition from Houston, Texas, the Daniel Davis Deep Dive Roadshow version. We'll probably be back again with you tomorrow. And like always, if there's any breaking news, you can count on us coming to join you. But in the meantime, hope you have a good Friday. We'll see you next time on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.